So I'd like to start off with my formal welcoming. Itaquiqui, Comanche Chen Squish, Shishach Tum Suya, Amos to Squamish Slewatooth Musquium Suya, Amos to Squai, Amos to Papayak, Amos to Stanley Park. So I said good morning, Itaquiqui, Comanche Chen Squish. Comanche is my Shishach name. And Shishach Tumsuya means Shishach is my home, the Shishach Nation. Welcome to one of the homes of the three nations who reside here, and that's Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam. Shishach is neighboring nation to the Squamish, and we've had ancestral ties go back thousands of years. Welcome to the village of Squai, which means the village of the mask. It was a mask discovered in the forest, and it is a ceremony we still carry on for cleansing, spiritual cleansing. Very sacred ceremony that isn't really shared with people from around the world, but I believe it's very important to share our spirituality and our culture that we have carried on for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. These things don't get shared with the public because there was a time it was forbidden and it was looked at as black magic. Welcome to the village of Papayak, and that's where the totem poles are today. It means bent point, and that area was one of the largest areas for gatherings for the potlatch. And then welcome to Stanley Park. And a little bit about myself. So as a kid, I never ever seen myself doing this in my future. Wasn't cool, I guess. I don't know. Kids are kind of strange these days. My grandpa gave me my drum though about 13 years ago. The purpose of that was to be a song carrier for my family. Both my grandparents attended residential schools and were deeply impacted, and it carried on through the generations. My grandmother was very, what we call spiritually sick. So she was trying to drown her demons, her old memories that she had from residential schools with alcohol. She basically drank her whole life. My grandfather too, but he had passion to be a leader as he comes from a hereditary bloodline. His dad was our last hereditary chief and first elected chief for my nation, as we had to take on the election system. And he had 3 terms in his life, and I think he would actually try another term, but he's in his 70s now, so he should just take it easy now. But yeah, so my grandmother was kind of first lady. She was the supporter of the family, take care of the family. But at a young age, she had my mom at 16, basically right out of residential school. She was not very emotionally attached to her first child, as it was a sin at the time because they didn't get married until a year after. So she was very spiritually, emotionally, physically abusive to my mom. So that detached their relationship and kind of detached mine. So that was due to the residential school and affected 3 generations all the way down to me. Even to my daughter, I would say, because my grandmother passed away when my daughter was 1 year old at 66. But before that, my grandparents took steps towards spiritual healing. There's a ceremony we call the Winter Longhouse Ceremony, and they have you go live in the longhouse for the winter time and make you go through all these different steps to have your spirit come out. And it could be due to exhaustion, it could be fasting, it could be shock, it could be fear, all these different things that can take a toll on your body. And the purpose of that is to have you scream or cry, and that is your spirit coming out through song. With that, your dance starts to form. This is a ceremony that we've practiced for hundreds of years, from what I can say. My family has taken that step for spiritual healing, and that connected my grandmother, as my mom and my uncle became spirit dancers as well. I'm the 3rd generation. I was given a drum. I am not a spirit dancer. They say it's up to your family to decide if you need to become a dancer to have your spirit reborn. But I was given the drum to be a song carrier, so I'm guessing my family thinks I'm doing good. So I feel like I'm doing good. I'm over 4 years sober now, and I've been carrying the drum for about 13 years, carrying on my culture and sharing that medicine of the song and the drum beat. So that's how I got my drum. This is not my drum, by the way. My grandpa would have gave me a way better one than this. This is my daughter's drum. She got it in her preschool. So this is actually her second drum. I gave her mine from preschool. She got this one, which is nicer than mine that I gave her. A little bit bigger, has a better sound to it. So I'd like to share a song as part of my welcoming. And the song I'd like to share is the Chief Dan George song. Anyone heard of Chief Dan George? He was actually a movie star. He is from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, the Burrard Band. He was in a movie called Josie Wales, I believe, with Clint Eastwood. Also, Little Big Man. And his character in Little Big Man I thought was quite humorous, but also effective, because Hollywood did stereotype First Nations in Westerns as stoic or savage Indians. He was a humble, blind elder. So as the village was getting attacked, he said it was a good day to die, and he started to walk out into the battlefield. Well, he ended up getting to the river without a scratch. So he felt he was invisible. I thought that brought a little bit of humor to such a horrific scene. But a humble elder shows, there's more than just the stoic Indian, the savage Indian. He used his celebrity profile to be an activist, and he used his voice to kind of get recognition, to be acknowledged, as Coast Salish peoples who are still here weren't acknowledged, like the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam. Even the park board didn't acknowledge them as they created this beautiful park on their land. They were finally acknowledged about 10 years ago. And I'll share a little bit more about that after. But Chief Dan George created this song for people to come together, to celebrate, to just be together in harmony and peace. So he created this song for gatherings. I'd like to share this song. Oh, Alnoch, Haichka. So thank you. I like to share the gesture as Coast Salish peoples. The hands out, palms facing towards us. It means honoring, so it can mean thank you, and it could mean welcome. So in our welcoming figures, you'll see the human with the hands out like this. It's part of our welcoming. I said Alnoch, which is thank you in my Shishak language. And Haichka is thank you in Halkomelem, which is the Musqueam language. With that said, I'd like to share how there is a quite wide range of different language along the west coast. There's about 900 different dialects and language. So it's very common to start to learn more than one language, even knowing up to 5 different languages. The reason for that is the potlatch. The potlatch was a system that was put into place for political and relationship building reasons. So political, putting in rules and protocols, taking care of the land, who's going to harvest where, who's going to fish where. It was very important to put those rules in place. Also, the potlatch was built so that people can come together, and also showed respect and wealth by giving to your neighboring nations. But also, there would be messages that would be sent out, and it could be a new rising of a leader. Maybe an old chief had passed on, ceremony for that, but a new rising of a leader. Intermarriage was a big one, as intermarriage had a lot of rules and protocols put into place as well. But with the potlatch would happen every year, that built relationships with your neighboring nations. And that was very important because we protected each other. So as Coast Salish peoples, there's about 50 different tribes or nations that are Coast Salish. And Coast Salish goes into Seattle past the border, as far up as halfway up Vancouver Island on the inside of the Salish Sea, as far up as Comox. And then along the Sunshine Coast, where I'm from, towards just in Vancouver, there's the Katzie, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, Tawasin nations. There's the 3 nations who reside here. There's my nation, there's Sliammon. There's so many different nations that we did build relationships with. So that's how the potlatch system worked. There has been archaeological evidence now, an island in British Columbia called Trickett Island, I believe, with evidence of human activity going back as far as 14,000 years. So there has been people living off the land for many years. In this area of Stanley Park, there was shell deposits or disposals, areas of crushed up shell, basically a garbage, an area where you throw your extra shells. There has been carbon dated artifacts around here that go back 8,000 years, 4,000 years, 2,500 years, and then even recent in the last 150 years as they took over one of our burial grounds here in the island. An island called Dead Man's Island, now known as a Navy station. Vancouver was officially a city in 1886. Sadly, the exact same year it burnt down the Great Vancouver Fire. 1888, they wanted to protect 1,000 acres here and turn this into Stanley Park. Probably the only thing I was happy that they the city did. So now I have this job here. So this is actually quite a young forest. As you can see, the trees are very tall, but they're still skinny. We used to have trees this size here. These are from the logging times, 1860 to 1888 here in the park. And these trees used to grow quite massive. This one's a Douglas fir, and this is a western red cedar. I'm going to be focusing a lot on these two trees, as well as the hemlock, the alder tree, maple. There's one log here of a maple tree. We don't get to see any maples. We do not get syrup from our maples here. But maples were very important. They grew in areas of moisture, streams and creeks where the salmon would run. And when they did grow in those areas, the moss grew very thick, which the moss was a very important item, multi-purpose, as you can use it for bedding, of course. Get some thick moss for my bed. You can use it for a sponge for cleaning. It can get messy cutting fish, cutting your game, and it could be even used for diapers. You think about it, that's probably the most sustainable diaper you can get. Just let the baby do its business, throw it back in the forest, maybe bury it, I guess. But also it has antiseptics, so it would help with the open wound. It would sponge up the blood and help it clog it up so that it would stop bleeding. I believe it also, some different moss provide a green color. So moss was very important. What grew out of the moss? The licorice root. It's a little fern, and the root of that fern, very good for coughs if you make a tea with it. It's got a minty flavor, very bitter, very strong, but it was a good cough medicine. And that comes from the maple tree if they're growing in places of moisture. And the maple, the wood itself was good. It was a hard wood, so when it dries, it's very hard to break. Even used for paddles, handles for different stone tools, and wedges as we plank cedar trees. How many planes is that now? I had a record of like 11 or 12 planes on me. And I was in the worst spot at the seawall where they were coming really low and landing. So yeah, I would really like to focus on seasons and how different items, different trees and plants were used in the seasons, which ones grow in the different seasons. Before we go on though, I'd like to share a little bit about the cedar here. Even though it's cut down, oh yeah, I forgot, nurse stumps. So these stumps have been sitting here for at least 130 years. Their purpose isn't over, as they are able to provide perfect little nests for these seedlings that fell on top. We have western hemlocks growing out of both of them, as the hemlock pine cones reproduce multiple times in 1 year, and they can float anywhere basically. They're the small little ones, these ones right here. And I guess one landed up there, and that one's probably been growing for about 30 years. And hopefully this will last a little bit longer so it doesn't fall down and get cut down. But you can see it becomes perfect nutrients. It becomes softer and is a perfect home. So a lot of the stumps you'll see trees, little trees or berry bushes growing out of them. The root system. These trees are able to understand which ones are their seedlings. It's also, they're able to understand through the network, the communication network in their system, which ones need nutrients, and they are able to send it through their root systems. So yeah, these stumps have been around for at least 130 years, but their purpose isn't over. We did fall cedar trees, and we would have rotten stumps. We utilize the tree for multiple things, and spirituality is one of them. Turning this powder here into a paint, mixing it with oils. And we still use it today in our ceremonies. It is now known as tumeth. And what we do as floor speakers or drummers, people who are doing the work in these ceremonies will wear, is that the word, wear? We'll put it on each side of their eyes so they could see positive things, hear positive things, speak or share songs in a positive way, putting just a little line and then having a positive touch. We want to keep any personal issues away from the ceremony, so it's kind of a reminder and a protector to stay positive and ceremonies like that. Our paint is usually mixed with red ochre as well, and red ochre is used for pictographs, and it's a spiritual protector paint as well, usually used in on stone tools or even the inside of your canoes. It's a protector for you. Has anyone ever seen pictographs? There's quite a few on the west coast here. I think there's like 40 of them in my territory. I don't even know what they mean. I don't think any of us know what they mean. Some look like aliens, to be honest. Some are smiley faces. Two-headed serpent. I know there's a few stories even from the Squamish about the two-headed serpent. Yeah. So, I know that was a long intro. I usually take this opportunity to share as much as I can before we go on. Now I'd like to focus on utilizing the forest as food, medicine, and technology. Before we go, does anyone have any questions or any stories you'd like to share? Any experiences? Yeah.
When you, the different groups had their gathering every year, did they keep the same place or did they go to a variety of places?
Good question. Here was one of the main winter villages that had one of the biggest longhouses, and that's where the totem pole area is. The totem poles do not relate to that at all, as they were purchased from northern tribes to make it the feeling of abandoned Indian village at the time. But we would have, like my own nation would have our own area for gatherings, and once someone hosts a potlatch, you expect in the near future the ones that you hosted to host you. And in respect, the ones who are hosting, you have to respectfully communicate in their language. It's very important to communicate in their language when they were hosting you. And then same thing when they come to your village, they communicate in your language. So it's an opportunity to learn. Yeah.
Where did the word potlatch come from?
I am not sure. I think the word means gathering. I can't remember from where. We didn't traditionally use that word, but it's known as potlatch now.
Okay.
Which means gathering and giving gifts.
Okay.
Anyone else?